Hello everyone. Today we're gonna discuss about the respiratory system. The main function of the respiratory system is to transport air into and out of the lungs, protecting the body against inhaled particles, and it's also important function to exchange of gas and carbon dioxide. The respiratory conducting passage are divided into two. The upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract includes the nose, pharynx, and larynx. The first one we're gonna discuss is the upper respiratory tract. Nasal cavity. When you breathe in, the air flows into your nostril and enter to your nasal cavity, which is lined by the release mucus. That mucus is salty and sticky and has lysozymes that enzymes kill the bacteria. The nasal cavity connected to four sinuses, which is air-filled spaces inside the bones that surrounds the nose called the paranasal sinuses. These are the frontal, ethmoid, sphenoid, and maxillary sinus. Those sinuses help to get the air that's warm and moist. They also act like a tiny chambers to help amplify sounds of your voice. So that relatively clean, warm and moist air goes from your nasal cavity into your pharynx or throat. The region connecting two called nasopharynx and the part of connecting the pharynx to the oral cavity is oropharynx. The soft palate, which is the softest portion behind the hard palate, which part you can feel your tongue, and the uvula hanging its end and move together to form a valve that closes the nasal pharynx of when you eat to prevent food from going up to your nasal pharynx. And there goes the laryngopharynx, the part of the pharynx that continue to the larynx. Larynx are also known as voice box. The primary function of the larynx in humans and other vertebrates is to protect the lower respiratory tract from aspiring food into the trachea while breathing. And there goes the epiglottis, act like a lid that seals the airway when you're eating, so that the food only goes one way to your esophagus, down to your stomach. Now, once the air makes way to the larynx, then it continues down to your trachea, or we also know wind whip.
Trachea. The trachea, also known as the windpipe, is a cartilaginous tube that connects the larynx to the bronchi of the lungs, allowing the passage of air, and so is present in almost all air-breathing animals with lungs. The trachea is a tube-like structure within the neck and upper chest. It transports air to and from the lungs when a person breathes. When a person inhales, air travels through the nose or mouth, down the trachea, and into the lungs. When the lungs expel the air, it travels back up the trachea and out through the mouth or nose. The primary function of the trachea is to transport air to and from the lungs. Without a trachea, a person would not be able to breathe. In addition to the transporting air, the trachea helps defend against disease. The mucus in the trachea help capture microorganisms such as virus and harmful bacteria before they enter the lungs. The trachea also helps regulate the temperature of the air coming in and out of the lungs. On cold days, the trachea helps warm and provide humidity to the air before it reaches the lungs. On hot days, the trachea helps cool the air through evaporation. Bronchi are the large tubes that connect to your trachea or windpipe and direct the air you breathe to your right and left lungs. They are in your chest. Bronchi is the plural form of bronchus. The left bronchus carries air to your left lung. The right bronchus carries air to your right lung. Your bronchi are an essential part of your respiratory system. As you breathe and your lungs expand, your bronchi distribute the air within your lungs. The bronchi are the two large tubes that carries air from your windpipe to your lungs. You have left and right main bronchus in each lung. After the main bronchi, these tubes branch out into segments that look like tree branches. Many respiratory conditions such as asthma or bronchitis can affect your bronchi. Your bronchi carry air too, and from your lungs. The bronchi also help moisturize the air you breathe and screen out foreign particles. Your airways are lined with cells that create mucus. The mucus keeps your airways moist. It also traps bacteria, virus, fungi, and other particles to protect your lungs and prevent infections. The bronchi are lined with cilia, tiny hair-like structures. The cilia help move mucus and particles out of your lungs. When you cough or swallow, the particles trapped in the mucus move out of your body or into your digestive tract, where your body can dispose of them. Bronchioles. Bronchioles are air passage inside the lungs that branch off like three limbs from the bronchi. The two main air passages into which air flows from the trachea or windpipe after being inhaled through the nose or mouth. The bronchioles deliver air to tiny sacs called alveoli, where oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged. They are vulnerable to conditions like asthma, bronchiolitis, cystic fibrosis, and emphysema that can cause constriction and obstruction of the airways. The function of the bronchioles is to deliver air to a diffuse network of around 300 million alveoli in the lungs. As you inhale, oxygenated air is pulled into the bronchioles. Carbon dioxide collected by the alveoli is then expelled from the lungs as you exhale. The bronchioles are not inert. The smooth muscle that surrounds the airways will automatically constrict or close and dilate or open to control the flow of air in and out of the lungs. Lungs. Each of the pair of organs situated within the ribcage, consisting of elastic sacs with branching passage into which air is drawn, so that oxygen can pass into the blood and carbon dioxide be removed. Lungs are characteristic of vertebrates other than fish, though similar structure are present in some other animal groups. In air-breathing vertebrates, either of the two large organs of respiration located in the chest cavity and responsible for adding oxygen and removing carbon dioxide from the blood. In humans, each lung is encased in a thin membranous sac called the pleura, and each is connected with the trachea or windpipe by its main bronchus or large air passageway, and with the heart by the pulmonary arteries. The lungs are soft, light, spongy, elastic organs that normally, after birth, always contain some air. If healthy, they will float in water and crackle when squeezed. This is lung sinks. The main function of the lung is the process of gas exchange called respiration or breathing. In respiration, oxygen from incoming air enters the blood, and carbon dioxide, a waste gas from the metabolism, leaves the blood. The lungs' main role is to bring in air from the atmosphere and pass oxygen into the bloodstream. From there, it circulates to the rest of the body. The organ requires help from surrounding structure in the body in order to breathe properly. To breathe, we use muscle of the diaphragm, the intercostal muscle between the ribs, the muscle of the abdomen, and sometimes even muscle in the neck.
Diaphragm, located below the lungs, is the major muscle of respiration. It is a large dome-shaped muscle that contracts rhythmically and continually, and most of the time involuntarily. The functions. Your diaphragm separates your chest from your abdominal cavity, or in short, your belly. In addition to helping you breathe, your diaphragm increases pressure inside your abdomen. This helps with other important functions, such as getting rid of your urine and feces. So the primary muscle of respiration is the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a thin dome-shaped layer of muscle and tendon that separates the abdominal cavity from the chest cavity. It gains its shape from its attachments and from the organs that surrounds it, especially the heart, lungs, and liver. The diaphragm attaches the costals along the lower rib cage, high in the front at the sternum, and deeply in the back along the spine. The diaphragm also attaches to itself by an essential tendon, making the diaphragm one of the unique muscles of the body. The diaphragm uses its essential tendons and its attachments as leverage to flatten during inhalation. The expansion of the ribs comes from the resistance of the internal organs to downward movements. As the internal organs are slow to move, the ribs expand to make room for the lungs. While the diaphragm attaches at the bottom of the ribs, its range of motion never reaches that low in the body. From below, we get a sense of the full range of the diaphragm as it would glide over the aorta, the vena cava, the esophagus, in the internal organs. And inside your chest cavity, the diaphragm works to help your breathing. When it contracts, air fills to your lungs. When the diaphragm relaxes, it expands and forces the air out. And that's how we breathe. Intercostal muscles. It is situated or extending between the ribs, intercostal space, and intercostal muscles. There are muscles that present within the rib cage. It consists of 3 layers of muscles: external, internal, and innermost layer. They combine to fill the space between the ribs. The functions. It assists with exhalation and moving the ribs and chest cavity back to their original position. These muscles combine to fill in the space between each rib and provide support for the respiratory system. Now I'm gonna explain the intercostal muscles. So the intercostal muscles are a group of intrinsic chest wall muscles occupying the intercostal spaces. The intercostal muscles consist of the external intercostal muscles, which course from the lower border of a rib ventrocaudally to the upper border of the rib below. Ventrally, they are bordered by the external thoracic fascia. The intercostal muscles originate at the upper border of a rib and insert ventrocranially at the lower border of the rib above. The last group are the innermost intercostal muscles, which separate from the internal intercostal muscles and insert behind the costal grooves. Inwards, they are bordered by the internal thoracic fascia. The fibrous space between the internal and innermost intercostal muscles and the lower border of the rib above forms the intercostal tunnel. These tunnels provide passage for the intercostal arteries, veins, and the intercostal nerves, which supply the intercostals and arise from the thoracic nerves. The task of the intercostal muscles is to tense the intercostal spaces during deep inspiration and support the breathing mechanism. The contraction of the external intercostal muscles causes an elevation of the ribs, functioning as inspiratory breathing muscles, whereas both the internal and innermost intercostal muscles lower the ribs, functioning as expiratory breathing muscles. Accessory muscles. There are muscles other than the diaphragm and intercostal muscles that may be used for labored breathing. The sternocleidomastoid, spinal, and neck muscles may be used as accessory muscles of respiration. Their use is a sign of an abnormal or labored breathing pattern. The functions. They they assist the primary muscles when the chest is not expanding or contracting effectively to meet ventilation demands. Now I'm gonna explain the accessory muscles. So the accessory muscles is the muscles of the neck, back, and abdomen that in some cases can assist the diaphragm with breathing. It is abnormal for these muscles to be used during normal breathing. In fact, uh, when these muscles are in use, it indicates that the person has an increased work of breathing and may be in some form of respiratory distress. The accessory muscles of breathing include the abdominal muscles, internal intercostals, sternocleidomastoid, scalene, and the pectoralis major. The accessory muscles that were mentioned are activated in order to assist the diaphragm with breathing whenever a person is in respiratory distress. They should not be used during normal, quiet breathing.
The last one we're gonna tackle is the pulmonary vasculator. In this pulmonary vasculator, we have two different arterial circulation that goes to our lungs. First of this is what we call the pulmonary circulation. And this is gonna be the circulation that ultimately end up involved in the gas exchange we're looking for. This circulation does consist of pulmonary arteries and pulmonary vein. But one of the distinguished here is that the pulmonary arteries, in this case, we are actually carrying the oxygenated blood all the way to the lungs for gas exchange. And the pulmonary vein are now the one carrying the oxygenated blood back to the left side of our hearts. Now, the blood of this system starts in our right ventricle, and this blood gonna endlessly come from the right ventricle. What we call the pulmonary trunk, which is gonna further divide and to our left and right pulmonary arteries. And this is happening to the cardia, where we also see the left and right main bronchi. Now from here, we're gonna see the further pulmonary arteries divide down with our bronchi, and they're gonna further divide down to our pulmonary arterioles, all the way down to the branches of different bronchioles, and eventually coming all the way down to our alveoli, and eventually forming bed of capillaries around the alveoli. From here, the gas exchange gonna take place in the capillaries. Oxygenated blood and those pulmonary capillaries gonna chain into our pulmonary venules. Now, this pulmonary venules gonna turn into pulmonary vein. Again, accompanying bronchioles stray along the ultimately into different veins that are leading each of our lungs are superior and anterior, and ultimately will drain into our left atrium. From here, the left side of our heart has the oxygenated blood to be able to pump throughout the rest of our body. The primary goal here is to move the blood around that gonna take part of that gonna take part in the gas exchange. So that leads to the other pulmonary vasculator system that we had something that we called our bronchial circulation. So this system here consists of bronchial arteries and veins. And this system actually comes from our systematic circulation that comes of fourth intercasual intercastural artery from the arteria. And so because of this, we're gonna make this a high pressure system. The goal of this system is to provide oxygenated blood to the actual lungs of tissue itself. This gonna go to the airways all the way down to the terminal bronchioles. This is also gonna cover the visceral of our lungs as well as supplying a oxygen to all blood vessels that make up our pulmonary circulation. From there, the blood gonna primary drained and go to azygous vein because of this we actually create a small psych, psychological shunt that add to the oxygenated blood back to the left side of our heart.